mouth, you know. And
so you
Girl,
do that. Don't do that anymore.
You never do that.
I am not going to demonstrate that right now, but
that would be quite the talent.
You didn't tell me things like this at hand, you know. That I
practice yoga, but we're not going there. So but this thing that I think that goes with this idea of psychological safety is that, I mean, there's a couple things. One is, for me, I have been called out by clients on some things that I have done or said that are, oh, wow, you know, that really made, this is how I felt, or this is how that landed for me. And to me, that was an example of that person feeling safe enough to be able to tell the expert or the consultant or the person that they had, you know, there was this kind of, there's not a equal footing relationship there, right? So I work for the CEO. People get a little intimidated by that at times, which is just part of the deal. But but this person was really honest with me, and I think that that's the key moment, is when you're confronted, right, with something where you've put your foot in your mouth or you've made someone uncomfortable. How I respond in that moment has everything to do with whether we create a culture of psychological safety. Is that kind of what it's not about, you know, it feeling like everybody's comfortable all the time.
No, it's not about we pet each other all the time. It's definitely not.
Did you say that?
You know, pet, you know, is that a word? Oh, I must be careful what I say. Sometimes I say things that means something else. But it's not about, you know, saying we're all happy and we all love each other, and, you know, psychological safety is about being honest. And what you did, and I hope you did that, because you haven't come to that part yet. But what I will say, and what is in my slides, but what I will say, embrace people who do that.
Yeah,
because the higher you get in an organization, the less people do that. And actually, my philosophy is the higher I get, the more I need it.
Exactly.
Because my influence is getting much bigger, and if nobody's telling me, and I'm not, and people won't do that for yourself. I have examples of a CEO saying, "I don't get it, Lettie. You know, I'm there every Friday afternoon, sitting in this room together with HR. There's nobody coming." So, yeah, you know, they don't know you. Why would they come? They have fear of you.
Yeah.
So go over there, go and find them and ask them how they.
But you think, in my experience in healthcare, since we have similar backgrounds, when the CEO goes in the big conference room that holds 150 people, and sits in there and waits for employees to come for an open forum, rather than going out on the floor. And one of my biggest pet peeves is not going on the shifts where people need him or her the most, the night shift.
Yeah.
And it's like, go into the environment, you know, go into the break room, and actually be there, and not sit in some conference room.
Huh? You will notice that, you know, we've all experienced that. I've experienced too. You do this. I have this, and I had it scheduled. You know, every CEO has, and I had that too. If I don't schedule it, I forget it.
Sure.
Because there are other important things that come in, so you have to admit that this is, and acknowledge that this is what you want. So it's a change of paradigm. It's almost like, okay, but these are the people, they are important. So it is every lunch break I spend with my teams. That's what I did in forensic mental health care. I left my office, and even if my secretary said, don't do that, you need your break. I said, I'm having my break now. You know, took my lunch, sat in the room, and, you know, and at the beginning, everybody was like, okay, what is she doing here? And so it was, and I said, well, just keep on going and do whatever you want to do. And if you want to include me, and I will ask. And this is how you build relationships. It's all about building relationships, because if you have a secure relationship, then people start asking you. And
yeah, I mean, one thing I want to add to what Shar said, there was a company I was working with a while back, and they had they were based out of New York. and they had locations in, in Iowa and so forth like that. And part of the problem was the management team never went to the Iowa location. They were just,
Yeah.
they were, we don't want to go to
yeah.
that
I love
part of
that.
town. And so what happened is that when team members visited New York from Iowa, they felt like they were, that they were the underdog. They're not held on the same standard, and they didn't speak up in meetings, and it was it's a big issue. So I think leadership can have huge consequences on psychological.
It is. It's.
We talk a lot with some of our clients about creating actual written team agreements around how to have those difficult conversations and how to hold each other accountable, how to encourage each other to speak up. And we're practicing what we preach. We even have team agreements at ICC where if someone's not sort of living up to the team agreements, we have, rules, if you will, or guidelines around how we can have a conversation around it. And that goes not just for us, on the front line, we're pretty darn flat, but how we interact even with, the leaders within our little company.
It's almost another code of conduct. It's
yes, that we developed together and that we've all agreed to.
There you go. I'm
and
done.
it's not. Yeah.
Tell that.
That's kind of the key, isn't it? The agreement is easy to say in the moment with the words on the flip chart, but to actually live into it's a whole different ball game.
Yes, and the next thing is, if you have it written on paper, how do you execute it? What happens if somebody doesn't stick to the agreements? How do you give the feedback? How do you get the conversation going about this without blame? Because if you attack somebody, they do like this, and then they start defending themselves. But that's not what you want. You want a conversation to make sure that it changes and doesn't happen again. So it's about inviting that somebody has the opportunity to learn and to change behavior. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's some kind of, especially in American culture there, and this is, I did some work in Germany at one point with a American company that had actually a really strong base in Germany. And I noticed a big difference in there is just a Wits effect to feedback here. Like we're raised with this almost knee-jerk reaction that feedback means you've done something wrong, or if you're having a difficult conversation, it's this tension, it's this, I don't want this. And I think that has permeated workplace culture for so long, especially people and leaders, we're talking about that bubble that you get into at the top, but there's also just this, it's going to take, I think, and that is to me the number one thing that destroys creativity and innovation in a company is the fact that people can't, really embrace a culture of giving and receiving feedback on an ongoing basis. And the companies that do that, seem to really be able to churn out a lot more creativity.
And what you see happening is actually, and that is found out actually by accident, but the companies that report their errors and have a very high rate of mistakes, they're not making more mistakes than others. They're just talking about them and learning from them.
Right.
So they have a very safe environment where it is okay to say, hey, oh gosh, I did something wrong, And so that is a different mindset that you need. Stop defending, because if I defend, I don't learn, and it will happen again, And but it is some of the most interesting things if you come into different cultures. What can happen?
Well, and I think that leaders set the tone for that. If someone makes a mistake and you're called out in front of everyone and you're punished for it, then we've already let people know that it's not okay to make mistakes.
No, you're in trouble.
What is that? The like R&D arm of Google? I forget what it's called.
Oh, not
Anyone?
Sorry?
I do know what it, I just am. I'm blanking on it.
I know, I just blanking. But they actually.
Hello, everyone.
Oh.
We're starting today. How are you doing?
Is it alphabet? That's a question.
So hi, I'm Char Miller. We are so happy to have everyone here. We're here at the People Strategies Forum, where we talk about innovative and leadership for times. And that's what you heard, this really great conversation with our colleagues today. And so thank you. Thank you for attending today. And we're going to get going with some exciting topics. We do these topics every week on Wednesday at Mountain Time at 10 a.m. So my name is Char Miller. I own a company called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. I'm a chief HR officer, and I'm also a people strategist and consultant with Comp Team. And I'm just esteemed to have great colleagues with Sam Reeve, who's the reward strategist and founder of Comp Team. And he is just, I have to say, a great partner here. We've been doing these forums now since, I think, March. So it's been incredible. Also joined with Lisa Jackson. She's a culture strategist, just joined our team and has been a rock star. And then Sumit Singla, who's also a people strategist, and he's also been working in HR consulting. So we are so happy to have our guests with us today. And welcome back, Meredith. Meredith Masse has come with us. She's the Senior Vice President at ICC at Innovate, Coach, and Consult. So I'm also happy to have Lettie, and Lettie is Theunissen-Schuiten. Probably didn't right, but Lettie is awesome. She is. She'll tell you where her background is from Germany, and also knowing that we're here globally is just phenomenal. So to go into the logistics today, we are very much about interaction on our people strategy forums. And so down below, you're going to notice there's a chat, and we highly encourage you to participate with us. Please put your ideas, thoughts, stories, questions. We engage. Our team all watches the chat. We work the chat into the conversation, and please participate. Also, we have a poll, and we're very much about free gifts. So each of us, and I think Sam's going to be able to pull up the poll here. You'll see that. One, we offer a TMA assessment with 1-year portal access. Lettie also has experience in that, as well as the Comp Team here. And then also you're welcome to have 15-minute consultation, which will more often than not be more than 15 minutes. But take us up on that, check out the poll, let us know if you're interested, and we'll follow up with you to schedule that. And then also, before we leave today, just remember that we have all the recordings. There's going to be many of the conversations that we have today that we talked about in prior weeks with some helpful information and tips. So for example, we talked about coaching culture last week. Please go back and listen to those recordings. Rather than watching some of the depressing news, I think it's good to listen to something positive. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about today. To start off with, Meredith and Lisa are going to talk about compassionate downsizing. And that is, believe me, near and dear to my heart. I have even had some friends recently that have been impacted by downsizing. And then also, Lettie and I are going to talk about a holistic approach to psychological safety in an uncertain world. And I think compassionate downsizing and psychological safety go hand in hand. So we're going to have open discussions, and then Sumit and Sam will also join us in conversations, as well as some of our participants. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and kick us off with Meredith and Lisa. And welcome back, Meredith.
Well, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So like Char said, I am Meredith Masse. I am with ICC, Innovate, Coach, Consult. We are a consulting firm, if you will, headquartered out of Denver, with clients across the country in the U.S. and across the globe. And I'm just going to apologize up front about my video liking to go in and out, but I will always come back. So That's something on my laptop. So thank you for the chat. Compassionate downsizing, a good choice of topic. I appreciate hearing that. So certainly one part of what we do is partner with organizations that find themselves in a position where they do need to do layoffs. And the organization, just in case this idea of outplacement is new to some, the organization will hire us to come in and work with, primarily work with the individual employees who are being impacted. And what we do is support them through their job search and teach them and coach them through how to conduct a modern job search. So talk about psychological safety. If you haven't had to do a job search in, let's say, 10 years, I've even worked with some for whom it had been 20 and 30 years. The job search looks very different these days than it did 20 and 30 years ago. So we coach those individuals on how to conduct a modern job search so that they can land in great new jobs more quickly. So what we'll talk about today is well, here, sorry, my mouse got ahead of my slide. So again, this is what we do at ICC: compassionate outplacement, game-changing leadership and executive coaching, and leadership development. So when we talk about downsizing, right-sizing, layoffs, reductions in force, no matter what you call it, when an employee or several employees lose their jobs, it hurts. It hurts them not only financially, which you can imagine is, you know, one of the first things that comes to mind. But when we start to work with these individuals, we see that it hurts them emotionally and professionally. So many times we come across individuals who say to us, how do I even know that I add value anymore? I was just laid off. How do I know that I'm worthwhile? And that's what, when they work one-on-one with our coaches, that's what we help. That's often the place that we start in helping them understand you do still absolutely have value for your next employer. So
Meredith,
I'll be curious to hear. Yeah.
Just one thought about that I wanted to, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just think that it's a kind of a question and something that I've seen also in the culture work that I do. I'm often coming in after the RIF, right? So I'm doing the alignment of the culture to the change or whatever. I think that one of the things that is really central to this is the fact that it's a lack of choice. That there was no voice that I had in that. And it's just a humbling experience to have that decision made for you in a boardroom of people that were putting sticky notes up on a board, right?
Right. And I'm seeing, you know, some other folks chime in here that you know, it's when it comes as a complete shock. And not coordinated with a level of compassion and dignity and respect that can make that after work, if you will, with the employees who remain so much more difficult. So if you think about, you've taken all of this time and care and created a spectacular employment brand. You've got onboarding practices that are, you know, award-winning, and you're showing new employees just how much you care about them. It's just as important to show them that same amount of TLC and care if and when it's necessary to eliminate positions and escort them on to their next role. Just as important to your employment brand, and just as important to show that goodwill to the employees who remain. There are also some, besides the fact that, you know, we, of course, at ICC believe that it's the right thing to do, there are absolutely some business reasons around why compassionate downsizing. So if your CEO, COO, CFO, general counsel needs some more data, I'd be happy to have a conversation with them around these points. When you offer compassionate downsizing or do downsizing in a compassionate way, you can reduce the potential for lawsuits. Now, while at ICC, when we're coaching individuals through their, into their next phase, we will never, ever, ever, ever give legal advice, but occasionally they'll ask us, I'm really seriously thinking about getting an attorney.
Meredith, you are not, your voice is, Meredith.
Yeah, I think.
Meredith, we have technical difficulties. Meredith? I'm not sure she's hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can hear Meredith.
So is it just her? It's not us?
It's,
Is everyone hearing Shar and I okay?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, as we're waiting for Meredith to.
Maybe we're all popping up. Oh, Meredith.
I'm not being heard.
Oh, you were just,
No,
for the last minute, we couldn't hear you.
It was really cool. It's like, charades.
I was going to wonder if is anybody in the chat read sign language, or not sign language, lip read? You could transcribe what she's saying.
Meredith, can
How
we
about
hear?
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you.
I don't know what happened. So sorry. Okay, here's the 10-second recap. Thanks everyone for your patience. When we can start to work with individuals on thinking about what's next, while we can never, ever, and will never give legal advice, when they say, I'm really considering contacting an attorney because I think I was treated unfairly. We say that's your prerogative. What we're going to work on is thinking about what's next. And the more quickly we can get them thinking about what's next, quite often what we see is that they start to put less energy into lamenting the past, lamenting what's just happened, and they do move forward more quickly. So we cannot guarantee that they won't seek out legal action, but it truly does. We have seen that it reduces the potential for lawsuits when you take care of them. When you take care of friends and coworkers of the employees who remain, the employees who remain see that, gosh, we understand that there was a business reason for this. I'm still sad that I've lost my, best work friend or, my work spouse. But when the remaining employees see that you're taking care of their former coworkers and friends, imagine the morale boost that they get. They're still going to feel not good, but they'll feel less bad when they know that their friends are being taken care of. This idea of managing former employees' perceptions of the company, I'll give you a quick story. This doesn't happen every time, but I was involved in the day of notifications with one of our clients. And, we're always sort of prepared for the worst kind of reaction to the news that people are receiving, because it is hard to hear. But one employee came in and he sat down and he said, I knew based on what was happening in the business, I knew that this was a possibility. He said, I'm just so grateful to this organization. This company has always been so good to me, And now that they're giving me outplacement services and treating me with such dignity and respect, I'll never hesitate to recommend this company to others. That's huge. Talk about psychological safety.
Well, and kind of right, and kind of the opposite of what happened, like in the midst of, I assume you're going to talk about this, but in the midst of COVID, where a lot of organizations just literally jerked their knee and, downsized half of their staff. And while that may have been a financial reality, there's always an opportunity to plan that, even if it's just one day of planning, plan the way that you communicate about that, right? And how you make those decisions.
Yes, and we're going to talk about what some of the steps that go into that kind of planning. A couple of more business reasons for why pay attention and why do downsizing as compassionately as possible. Think about your organization's reputation in the community that you serve or communities that you serve, as well as with your customers. We have supported several large organizations with locations in all across the U.S. and internationally. And in some cases, they were one of the main employers in some of the smaller communities where they existed. There's nothing worse for your reputation as an organization than doing the downsizing in a small town that's relying on you and not treating those employees who are community members really well. And so we've supported organizations in getting even the local workforce centers involved, because they all know each other anyway, right? So what are these employees going to say when they're out shopping in the grocery store, for example, and they're talking about their former employer? And what if that former employer is only shuttering the business for a time until the economy can come back,
right,
and then they need to rehire?
Exactly. That was mentioned in the chat where, somebody's saying, what about if through your outplacement services, the company realizes, oh, you actually were not redundant. We're going to hire you back. And then that creates its own form of loyalty. This, where do my loyalties lie? And how you were treated in that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, we know in some cases, if it's a small enough community and you're the big fish in the small pond, they may not have too many other choices, but how will they then show up for work if you need to bring them back? I actually have a friend who was impacted. She lives in New York City. She works in the fashion industry, and talk about knee-jerk reaction. Her company did that exactly, and suddenly laid off lots of people. Within 2 weeks, they realized, oh, oops, wait, we need you back. And she was happy to go back because she loved her job, loved the company, and was treated fairly enough on her way out that she was willing to go back. So also the last point is when we get people moving forward and they land more quickly, in normal times, we can brag that with outplacement services, we help them land 2 times more quickly than if they were to go it alone. In COVID times, well, there are no guarantees right now of anything, but the sooner they land, the more quickly they come off your unemployment rolls. And so quite often that investment is well worth it, well worth it. So let's talk about the timing. And Lisa, you brought this up. We're going to talk about how to prepare, how to conduct the notifications, and some of those best practices that are out there for the remaining employees, and the
Meredith,
survivors.
Wanting to make sure that Smith gets whatever he comes on for. I also wanted to, in that overview you just offered. Somebody's actually in the chat wanting to know what are some of the best ways in which you can give people these services. She's saying it oftentimes seems like an administrative obligation instead of a true process that allows the employee, as you said, to be able to move forward with a better and stronger position. So just speaking to some best practices as you go through this, I think would be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
So Matt, were you trying to ask a
Absolutely.
question or?
So
speak?
actually, a lot of interesting things being talked about in the chat, Lisa and Meredith. And it seems the last point on the earlier slide, or in fact, the penultimate point on the earlier slide, which spoke about reputation. So I think all of us remember those horror stories. If downsizing without compassion happened with us, or if we were thrust into the roles of people having to downsize, or if we knew people who were downsized with absolutely zero compassion. And one of the examples we've spoken about on this forum earlier as well is that of a taxi service called Bird in Europe, where in an episode of almost like a science fiction movie, people were invited to a Zoom call. They heard a recording saying, your employment's been terminated. So it was an automated call. And by the time they hung up or the call got over, they were locked out of their computers, their emails, all possible access to the organization was shut off. So that's, I think, the absolute opposite of the point we're trying to make here. And it's a story that's going to stick with me for life for sure. And I'm going to stay away from that company as a service, as a customer as well. So it's a dent to that organization in all possible forms, in my opinion.
Wow.
Sumit, that I had a visceral reaction to the situation you just described. And that is truly, as you said, the exact opposite way that we would ever coach our clients to handle that situation. These are human beings that we're talking about. These are people that you once relied on in your organization to do great work. You hired them for a reason. If the business reason is there, and usually that's why we see downsizings, is that there's a business reason for it. Let's remember, and I know on this call I am preaching to the choir and the converted, but we have to help our leaders understand that these are people with families, with lives outside of what they did for us in the workplace. And just by virtue of being another fellow human being, they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point.
No pre-recorded messages, please, people, please.
And interestingly, on the other extreme, so I was interning with Microsoft when the 2008-9 crisis happened, the collapse of the financial markets. And there's also a cultural angle to it that I'm based in India, where we don't really do a lot of downsizing. It really hurts a firm's reputation if they talk about letting people go. And Microsoft was doing this. Usually downsizing is big news in the newspapers, and people are all over social media and things like that saying, what a terrible company to let people go in their hour of need. But Microsoft handled it so beautifully. So they had very strong outplacement services. They had individual counseling sessions for employees, their families. And this is, I'm talking about 12 years ago. It's still not the norm in a lot of organizations today, despite the pandemic. They were doing it all those years ago. Not a single employee had a bad word to say about them. And in fact, once things improved, after they got rid of Steve Ballmer in 2013, a lot of those people joined back as well under the new phase of growth. And many of those people, I know them personally, they're still there in the organization. So I think it just serves an organization so well in the longer term if they do this the right way and with compassion, with heart, and genuinely.
You know,
Amen.
uh,
I couldn't agree more.
that is really reiterated for those of you who have not yet or who have read The Infinite Game with Simon Sinek, his latest book. Unbelievable, really powerful premise. And he talks exactly about this, that layoffs in themselves are really about playing a very finite game, which business is not. So it really has this kind of quality of creating environments that have no trust, no collaboration, and no innovation. And that's what you get when you have this constant cycle.
Yeah. Well, let me give some really, really practical ideas here. I know Lettie is going to blow our minds with some amazing ideas around creating psychological safety. And I think it absolutely applies. All of her tips will apply in this particular situation. So I'm just going to keep this really, really practical. When we are talking about the before, as you're planning, please plan. Obviously, you're going to prepare and review separation documents, hopefully with your attorney, either your internal counsel or your external employment attorneys. If you happen to not have one and you want one who is excellent, I have a good friend, she's now a friend, that I've met professionally that I can highly recommend as an employment attorney who works first from the heart, if you can imagine such a thing. So if you need that kind of support, let me know and I'd be happy to introduce you. Establishing a time and a place for the notification meetings. That is that meeting with one-on-one, not via pre-recorded Zoom call. And in this case, sometimes the time and place is via Zoom, especially if your knowledge workers are still working remotely. But have a private place where you can have the conversation. And make sure they know, if it is via Zoom, that they will want a quiet place, and also make sure that they know you are in a place where the conversation is private on your end. I can't stress enough the idea of training your managers who will be involved in the conversation. Typically what we see is it's almost a three-way conversation. There is the individual who is being let go, a representative from human resources, and the individual's direct supervisor, or someone along that chain of command. That manager is key in making sure that the individual knows how valued they were and that it's an unfortunate situation. It's also really important to keep those conversations pretty brief. So script, train the managers. I remember when the first time I had to give news to one of my direct reports who we needed to let go. I was with a travel company and it was immediately following 9/11. And we saw the writing on the wall that we wouldn't be able to sustain with the number of employees that we had. And one of my direct reports was one who was being let go. I had to role play with my manager to get the tears out, because this was hard for me. I was young and or younger, I should say, and I just couldn't even imagine. So I got the tears out, role playing with my manager, and following the script, because that meant that I could be in the moment for my employee. So train your managers. If you need help with this, this is something that we do at ICC as just a part of our services. Also support your leaders in creating the messaging around the business reasons for the termination. This is critical. And it's in this messaging where we can start to show an ounce of compassion. Even though we're focusing on the business reason, this is the time to say, this is not easy for any of us, especially our friends that we're having to let go. So supporting leaders in creating that messaging is important. The other piece is the external PR message, especially when you're the big fish in a smaller community. Get proactive, get in front of the media. The news will leak, they will hear about it, be prepared. Plan this ahead of time, what your messaging is, so that the company comes across as one that is still trying to do its very best for the employees. Obviously, I'm going to suggest selecting an outplacement partner. Whether it's ICC or not, of course, we would be honored to be the ones to support employees and your organizations. But these are some basic questions that I would suggest you ask when you are looking for an outplacement partner, and one that mirrors your values as an organization, to make sure that your employees are actually getting the services that you're willing to pay for. I could tell you some horror stories that I've heard and on this end, but I won't for today. If you'd like to hear them, you can connect with me after. But again, just some quick, good questions to know if the outplacement firm is actually going to meet with and take care of the employees that your organization is willing to make an investment in. The last bit in terms of outplacement as part of compassionate downsizing, some things to consider in terms of what level program to give your folks. Just some ideas around, what to consider. Certainly their position and their level within the organization, their seniority. I'll even go so far as to say tenure. Even if it's an individual contributor level employee who has been with the company for 30 years, consider a slightly more generous something for them between their severance and their outplacement. Shar, you're on mute, but it looks like you have something to offer here.
Oh gosh, well, unfortunately I've had to facilitate a number of downsizings, and I personally know of major companies, I'm talking well-known major name companies, that could definitely use this service. And in my view, oftentimes the HR person is put into a political kind of a bureaucracy situation, and not to go into the weeds about what that means, but I think sometimes the HR leaders, because you might have a CEO or a president that is so adamant, we have to make these cuts, we need to cut, X percentage, and how ironic, they happen to be all the older employees across multiple departments. Well, I could tell you stories, but I sign mutual release agreements too. So, but at any rate,
I was just going to say, this is why working with an employment attorney, whether it's internal general counsel or external attorney, is critical to help do that due diligence up front to make sure that even that you're not accidentally singling out a specific population.
Right.
They can truly help make sure that it's compliant as well as compassionate.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's interesting because even after I've left certain organizations, I was contacted by people well after the fact, and it is pretty fascinating to look at the pattern of who is being laid off and how they were, selected across multiple areas. And even big companies with thousands of people, people talk. So this is great. It's I think true. Having an external party is a good idea.
So Sam popped in.
Yeah. So one thing, Meredith, before we move on to the next phase of this, I just want to make sure that one question was answered, and I'm not sure. Forgive me if I
Please.
missed it, the conversation. But how when planning for a layoff, how early should a transition firm be brought in to make this an ideal situation?
Oh gosh, practically the moment you know that it's going to be a reality. And it's because we can help with a lot of this upfront planning. We've got scripts that we can, provide to help make your own. We've been there, done this hundreds and hundreds of times.
Right.
So lean on your outplacement provider from the very beginning, even in just helping you with the planning. Like I said, scripts. We've worked with large organizations who are doing entire site closings, and we will help organize lots of other external parties like workforce centers. We've organized job fairs. That's the kind of thing that we want to have in place and the plans ready to just plug and play the moment the notification conversations happen, so that employees have all of these resources at their fingertips and they're not waiting for us to do the planning after they've been notified. The manager training piece, that's something that we feel is so important, and that we will come in and do in the organization to train managers how to have these conversations, what to say, and sometimes even more importantly, what not to say. That's a very long-winded way of saying, call on your outplacement provider the moment you think that this is a possibility, because we're going to hold your hand through this. And I often see that, HR especially is so heavily relied on during these situations, that, you're responsible for putting all of the plans into place, but who's taking care of you? Let us help do that. We want to help take care of HR and take some of the burden off your shoulders.
Well, we certainly utilize your services. Do you have like a consultation that you can offer, either individuals or companies?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And I'll put my contact information in the chat. It's also in the slides a couple of times.
Meredith, one question that I think it may have been in the chat, but it's been on my mind too, is I've got a really good friend who works for a very, very large company, Fortune probably 50. And they are going through a massive round of layoffs at this point. And it feels like cutting the dog's tail off 1 inch at a time, because her division, people around her are being laid off, but she's sitting in this very weird place of, am I next? When am I next? And the rumor mill is flying. There's actually a whole underground around it that is feeding that. When you're planning these, is it, just necessary to take a staged approach with a massive layoff? I mean, they're, probably talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
My gosh, yeah. It honestly, that's such a great question, Lisa. It honestly depends, I believe, on the business and their situation. I'll give you an example of a national financial services company that we've supported for several years, and they were essentially closing a center in Wichita, Kansas. Here's, they're thinking, because they're very employee centric. I can only imagine it's a really great place to work, because they do put a lot of care into their planning with their employees. They gave everyone notice ahead of time, and some people were being asked to stay for a year, but the entire site was notified all at once. Some people were asked to stay for 30 days, some 90, some 6 months, some a year. They put incentives in place to keep them because they didn't want to lose these valuable employees before their termination date. So they put incentives in place to keep them there. They also allowed those employees to start working with us sooner rather than later, so that they were ready with, resumes and LinkedIn profiles and a marketing plan, et cetera, to be able to hit the ground running on, day one of unemployment. I can't presume to know what that large organization's situation is. Sometimes a phased approach is, an unfortunate necessity for organizations because they don't want to lose their employees all at once. But that speaks to me, that situation that your friend is in speaks very loudly to me that company needs to be constantly communicating about what the current situation is. I would also, as a friend, yeah, well, that's what we would coach. But
Right.
Since that's not happening, then the advice for your friend is get your resume ready.
Yeah, exactly. Which interestingly, she's actually okay with, she's kind of waiting to be laid off and wants that. But the weird part is there's no work at all. So she's literally taking a paycheck and isn't working because her boss was laid off. And the team is sitting around like wondering what to do. So I know there's a lot of complexity to this, but I think that I like your example of really the transparency and communication is the key.
I mean, that's ideal.
Yeah.
That's ideal. Just a few more tips for before, and these checklists are the longest because if you take the care and time in the planning up front, sometimes the during and after is a little bit easier. It will never be easy, but a little bit easier. So if family members work together, think about how you will approach each family member. When Sumit mentioned that pre-recorded message and then instantly people were cut off from everything. If we're in a high security situation, maybe that's necessary. I mean, I think the point is you have to balance business needs and treating your people like human beings. If they need to get something off the system that's, a work product that they can use as an example in going forward, then maybe let them do that. If it's high security, obviously, then explain why they can't. Think through that timing. We've heard stories from well-meaning clients who accidentally turned off access the first thing the morning of. Someone didn't have a conversation until 10 o'clock, but by that time she already knew that was her last day because she didn't have access to email or their network or anything. So it's careful coordination, especially with IT, is critical. Think about emergency procedures. Especially if it's, folks who are on site, think about how they may react and just be prepared. I would absolutely recommend calling in employee assistance and having them at the ready. Make that a part of the information that's handed out in the severance package. If they're on site and they need transportation, provide transportation that day. Call the Lyft, call the Uber, and help them get home safely. Again, the scripts are super important. And then plan very carefully around how they can return company equipment and pick up their own personal belongings. You might offer to package things up for them so they can do a drive-by and pick up a box, or, allow them to come in and collect their belongings at a time when it can be done privately. And absolutely ahead of time, prepare in advance for the impact on remaining employees. I want to give, I know I need to turn over to Lettie, but let me just give you a quick idea of the during. And this goes into that manager training piece. And I think Lettie's presentation around psychological safety will help during this as well. It's, you know, remaining calm, anticipate some of those questions that they're going to ask. Do, however, keep the conversation short and to the point. You know, focus on the business reason, provide an overview of severance, hopefully including outplacement services, and talk about how they can get their belongings and return company belongings as well. Short and sweet. If this meeting has to be done virtually, please use Zoom, GoToMeeting, whatever meeting software you prefer, so that you can have eye contact with the individuals and be present even if you can't be in person. The second best is by phone. And if you can't do Zoom or phone, then wait for a time when you can do Zoom or phone. I think Sumit gave us a great idea of how not to do it. So no texting, no FedEx packages, no emails, no pre-recorded messages. And here are some other ideas of how not to conduct those if the goal is to conduct them compassionately. We also recommend not having the notification conversations on a Friday, because that gives them the weekend to have things stew, and by Monday they're a ball of negative emotions. So earlier in the week, and then make yourselves, especially as the HR professionals involved, make yourselves available to answer all the questions, The after part is allow those employees who remain, I often refer to them, these are the employees that you're relying on to carry on the business. Let them have input on how they, well, this is the after, let the individuals who are impacted have input on how they get their belongings. And then talk immediately with the rest of the organization. You need to tell them that there was a business reason for this. And while you don't necessarily want to give specifics around, you know, what the severance packages were, tell them what you are doing to take care of them. There is a generous severance package. They're working with an outplacement provider. We've called in the workforce center. The EAP is available to them and to you as well. I think we've probably addressed a lot of the questions that have come up along the way, but were there any that came up that we missed? I hope this is helpful.
Yeah, I think we're over time, so we appreciate that. So if anybody does have any additional questions, we'll be sure to identify them in the chat, and also people can get in touch with you indirectly, right, Meredith?
That is true. So I just want to reiterate this idea of taking care of them, because they will talk. They will talk later.
To work, yeah. In a transparent world, that is real.
So
glass door is not your friend.
This is true. I've blacked out, so hopefully you can't tell who we're talking about here. But if we can help, we would love to help. We've got even more tips on a podcast that we produced during sort of the beginning of the pandemic. You can access it here, and hopefully these are some practical takeaways for if and when your organizations need to have these tough conversations.
Really
well,
good.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Meredith. I sincerely appreciate it. I do want to give Lettie a chance to talk on her presentation. Her presentation is absolutely in alignment with yours. So hi, Lettie, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. Oh, I'm still on.
So
Oh.
Lettie, I would love for you to tell us where you're located and how you came to us.
Oh, well, I'm located, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. So I'm located in Germany. I am originally Dutch, and but since 2002, I'm located in a very warm Germany at the moment. So,
Nice.
yeah. So.
It's got to be beautiful. Love to get there sometime.
Yeah, it is beautiful. We found a beautiful spot. We live in the middle of the industrial area, the Ruhrgebiet, but there's a lot of green around us, so it's beautiful out. Yeah, it's a beautiful country, definitely.
You're going to speak with us about psychological safety. I think you've got a few slides for us today.
Yes. Shall I start?
Yeah, let's get, and I know we are a little bit out of time, but that's okay. I would say speak into the last half hour.
Okay, and just say if I take too long, if I need to move on. So here we go. Hi, everybody. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. I'm, as said, I'm Lettie Theunissen-Schuiten, originally very difficult to pronounce, so Lettie is perfectly okay. I am originally Dutch, as said, live in Germany, and I am doing a PhD in England. And maybe that already explains why psychological safety is important. The only thing you have to think about is if you ever experience being dropped from one culture into the other, you know what happens. You know, everything you think, you know, all of a sudden doesn't count anymore. So I've have a long experience in forensic mental health care. And forensic mental health care is not CSI Miami. Yeah? Forensic mental health care is the treatment of mentally ill people with, who also committed a crime. So in high secure institutions. I've had several senior management positions, was a member of the board, and in 2010, I founded my own business. And in this business, I sort of have three things I do. The first thing, what I really love to do and keep on doing, is that I am in this very specialized area of forensic hospitals, guiding teams in their daily work and with clinical supervision, and that's a very specialized areas. No worry, the team dynamics most of the time are the same as everywhere else. The second thing I do, and what I really love, is that I go into organizations, and I'm sort of an organizational ethnographer. And I am in organizations and helping people to create an environment where people flourish and can grow and unveil talents. And in that area, I'm also a partner in TMA International, where we are supporting people to unveil their talents. And the third thing I do is I love to share knowledge and experience, and I do that in teaching and training people on the job, most of it.
Well, how relevant right now, obviously, with I think mental health overall is
Yes.
a very critical, vital discussion at this point throughout, with all of the global changes and challenges. So this is going to be very interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the thing is that we pay so much attention to physical safety, and you know, with soccer games here in Europe, you with sports events, you know, and on the streets everywhere, it's thinking about physical security. But what is going to come to us the next coming years is this physical, psychological safety. Is how do we experience where we are, and why do we do that? Simply because it's important. I brought the Google's research, which probably everybody knows. They did a lot of surveys under all their employees and all their team members, and number one was psychological safety. So that is matters importantly. It's feel safe to feel to take risks. At TMA, we always say people flourish when they feel well. Not like it used to be, you know, have a forum in front of you and everybody's telling you what to do. No, that's not when people flourish. So I have another one of why psychological safety, simply because, and it's not that difficult, you know, that's why we need to pay attention to it, because it is known that people flourish when they feel safe, when they have the feeling they belong, and they experience fulfillment. So, well, this is what everybody can read. And for me, one of the most important things is fear in an organization always means trouble. So there I connect to Meredith. Start talking as soon as you know that you need to release people, start talking about it. And maybe if you haven't had all the answers yet, but start talking about it, that this is happening in the organization.
Well, I would agree. I own a company and, we have less than 20 employees, but obviously the sustainability of our company is very much impacted by the ability to keep open. And, I'm very curious what your thoughts are on that, because we've been working on being transparent, very honest about the aspect of our organization might not be able to physically see clients right now, which may impact everyone's jobs. So not only is it a challenge to keep that psychological safety, there's outside factors that are happening in our world today that are outside of our control as business owners, right? And so I would say a year ago, this would have been a critical factor for companies, but today even more so. There's things that are happening we don't understand, or how we're going to deal with it as a company to sustain.
That is it. And it is what Meredith said also, if you are a key player, it's important to share this insecurity also with your employees, that you don't have the answers, but that you're going to work on it, that you create an environment where we try to see what works. Nobody has the answers, all the answers at the moment, and you need all your people to think along. And it makes me think of a situation that happened, I think about 2 years ago, where I was supporting a large hospital, a large general hospital in a different department. And what I liked about this hospital, and that is my first tip right away to all the leaders out there and the HR people, what I liked about this hospital was the CEO and the HR manager were sort of inseparable. And so they talked a lot, their ideas were the same, and or not always the same, but they developed things. And what they had was, there was a merge between one department of their hospital, and they bought another hospital that was almost bankrupt. And they had everything in place. They developed a vision and how they wanted to do that. They bought the thing, and they developed a strategy. They inserted the key players in their own hospital, in the old hospital, together with the leaders of that hospital, and everything was sort of in place. And then we were drinking coffee together, the three of us. I thought it was unintended, but of course it was not. And they were sharing that they didn't understand why it didn't work. And the CEO said, and I really liked him because he was somebody who really wanted his people to feel well, and he wanted to have this normal hospital people to be happy, and they weren't. He sensed that. And he said, every Friday, part of our strategy is that every Friday I'm in this new hospital, and I sit there together with the HR manager, and we invite people to come, but nobody's coming. Mm-hmm. Said, well, why should they? You're the enemy. You're doing a takeover. So, and then he says, do you have ideas? And I think, well, I think I have ideas. And so what we first did is we set up a meeting between the two hospitals, and they were not there, the CEO and the HR manager not there. And I just said that they sent me because they wanted, the thing was, they wanted it to work, and they wanted people to feel okay to go along. And what I sensed in this meeting was fear to lose their jobs, fear to lose their belonging. Where do I belong? This is a big hospital. I will go under. Our whole department goes under. What about our culture? People forget that they were almost bankrupt, so they wouldn't have survived if they weren't. But you forget that. And after this meeting, I went back and I said, well, this is not going to work if we spend much more meetings like this, because, it's in an experimental environment. So it's created. People will not say everything, and otherwise they just complain. If you let me, I go in. and just see what happens. And we discussed the budget, and he said, well, you do your thing. And I just went in and I started talking to people and always saying, okay, that I'm your longer arm. And I was just hearing people, what was going on. So I could talk to them, but this is what's going on. And this is where you can jump on. This is what you can do. Because the point is, the higher you get in an organization, the less feedback you get. People just don't get to you. So you don't know if you're doing the right thing. And so we had joint meetings. We asked people to join in the decision making. Just and that was very helpful. And they successfully merged then later on. Yeah.
Well, and I have to say, from my perspective on that, I mean, it's interesting as you talk about the close, tight relationship between the HR person and the CEO. And I think that is a great thing. I also think that oftentimes, because I also have healthcare system background,
yeah,
that employees are really watching that behavior, because it's almost like they are in the in club. They are the kind of like high school. They are the populars. They're the class presidents, you know.
Yeah, those are the people who pay.
Don't really feel accepted into the perception of how that's being perceived. I mean, I don't know if that's the same thing in your organization, but I mean, it actually getting out and talking to people on the floor is something that I think is really important to reduce that kind of perception.
That is what the thing is. When you say, what can I do right away? I would say to all leaders out there, and to all your leaders that you have, go out and talk to your people, ask them questions. Do you feel that you're included? Do you feel that you are appreciated? Can you talk openly? Those are very important questions. Do you feel you're able to allowed to think differently? You know, you don't need people who all think the same. You know, you also need people who feel they can say, okay, everybody's saying left, but I would like to go to the right. And, you know, can we try that? That is what you need. So, and fear is it's sometimes very important as well, you know, but it does make, it does something with your skills, and if you're not feeling safe enough. Let's see that works well. I brought this one because going back to the thing that you said at the very beginning, this affects all areas of life. You know, it's not just in an organization. It's also, you know, working at home, and your kids aren't allowed to go to school, and all of a sudden you're in a meeting. It's not supposed to happen today, but you know, somebody all of a sudden runs in, and so how do you deal with that, being in this constant situation? But also, you know, we have a lot of movements going on, and so I love this. This is actually, I'm done now. You know, what freedom is no fear to speak your mind and to be who you are, and that you are allowed to be different. As what? Different from what? So, why is this not? No, there we go. So shortly, why I think it is we need a holistic approach. A lot of people, a lot of organizations, and adopted the approach from that Amy Edmondson found out and said, the Harvard business professor, and said that it's a team environment. It's a shared belief in a team, that the team is safe enough to take risks. So I do believe that that is important. Yes, that is, but it's not just the team. And if you look in time, that the first time the term was mentioned, psychological safety, was Shine and Bennis in '65. And they sort of created, to make it visual, in a way that, you know, you take a management team, bring them in a situation where it is safe. We create an environment that is safe, with safe leadership, and see if they can change. They were doing experiments to try out what would work in times of change. It was a time of organizational change. So it's about leadership, and it's about what do you need in leadership. That's what they say. Kahn picked up on it in the 90s, and he just said it's an employee's sense of it is safe enough without negative consequences, career consequences, for my personal feelings. And what happened, an example is, I'll never forget that. I was in a hospital, guiding a hospital, general hospital again. And there was a patient, and this patient was, the situation was escalating. He was very angry, very mad, and very, and he has been there for an hour, and it was going up. And this patient was angry because the chief doctor wasn't coming. And as we all know, the nurses are always there,
Yeah.
and the doctors are always on tour. So I was watching the situation, and because I was guiding this hospital, and I do a lot of coaching on the job, so I'm just there, and I intervene when I see something or give feedback or something. So I went at a certain point, I went to the nurse and I said, "Why don't you call the doctor? Because he promised he's going to come. And this man is waiting for an hour now, and you see that the situation is getting out of control." And she just looked at me and said, "Lettie, I'm not going to call him. Do you know how loud he yelled at me? And do you know how hard it's going to be for me in the meeting next week that we have planned? I'm not going to do this."
Wow.
So this is a personal sense that is there. At the same time, we have this belief in the shared belief in the team. We all know this. We all know the beautiful example, finde ich, all the time. Oh, that was a bit German. Is, if I remember my time in forensics in Holland, we had in this very large institution, 2,000 employees, we had sports events every year. And teams could sign up, and we had different departments in psychiatry, and almost every year the teams on forensic mental health care won, almost, because they just they have to know each other. They have to know how they think, what will happen, who will do something. They know that they can rely on each other. They know they can speak openly, because that is essential to work in very complex, high-risk situations, as in airlines, as in banks, as in intensive care, and so on, because that is highly important. So that is an important part also.
I just want to share an example. When I was young in my HR manager career in my 20s, I remember working at a grocery distribution company, and sitting in the executive conference room as a young 27-year-old. And I remember the conversation, because we were struggling with sales. So we weren't hitting our sales productivity measures and targets. So the president, which by the way had an office that had pictures of him with big game hunting, so then there was pictures of him with his, elephant, and tigers and bears, oh my, with him and these big bazooka guns. And what was interesting is in the boardroom, as we would meet every morning, I remember just trembling, because I'm like, and I was pregnant, which is also kind of a thing, but anyway, to also feel vulnerable. But I remember sitting in those, it's also good education for your unborn child. But anyway, so you're sitting there, and the president literally would say, "Okay, we need ideas. We need ideas about how we're going to increase our sales and our numbers and our outcomes and our metrics and blah, 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 all operational, financial stuff that us HR people are like, I got better in that area." But eventually, he'd go around the room, and it was almost like I could imagine him with an imaginary bazooka gun. And as soon as they would ask a question, "Shar, what do you think about increasing productivity of our sales team?" And I'd say, "Well, I think that we should, offer, incentives and this and that." And I come up with my ideas. And it was like an imaginary bazooka gun would come out from underneath the table, and he'd go, "Pow." It's stupid idea.
Horrible. You're already worried before you have to talk, because you know this is going to happen.
Yeah, everybody would just shut down. I mean, the ideas were squashed, and not only that, it permeated the organization, because the team would go out to their people, and they were afraid to come up with those innovative ideas.
It's horrible.
It was the fear aspect. If I say an idea, I'm going to be shut down, and ultimately my job's on the line and my team is on the line.
Yeah.
So this is very real.
So I don't think anybody felt very invited at in your team, did they?
No. Ultimately, obviously, we had a lot of turnover. I'm not going to say, but there was a lot of turnover. And as we know in the executive ranks, my opinion, and this is not scientific, is that typically executives turn over every 5 years or so. And in my view, I would have loved to talk to you about the psychological safety impact that was happening at that executive team level and ultimately impacted the organizational outcomes and return on what the operations. It really affected the business, all because of that behavior.
Yes, because it does something with your mind. If it does something with, if you just have to reflect on, and you just talked about this, but everybody has situations that what happens if you start doing things, and it's something new, and there is somebody talking to you and almost yelling at you, pointing at you, had to deliver right away. So all of a sudden your skills stop working.
Mm-hmm.
I remember what happened with this, simply with this seminar. I was, at the moment you asked me, I was at, oh great, Sam asked me at an international partner meeting, and I said, oh okay, I'm going to do this. And, put me in front of 400 people, and it is no problem, until I realized about a week before I started, there are no people out there that I can see or feel or sense.
Live too.
So, and all of a sudden, you know this feeling. You start to see your hands are starting to sweat. Your mouth and your words come out difficult. And then I met the team. And exactly what is supposed to be happening in an organization is the team supported me. They had faith in my abilities. They said, "Oh, you're going to do this. We're there, and we're going to get through this together." And that's exactly what happened. So, and this is in a small way what you can do. So it is an holistic approach, simply because this is what happens. It's an individual sense that you have. It is a shared belief in a team. It's also providing an atmosphere, but it's also formal and informal organizational practices. I mean, if I'm on a temporary contract and I having problems in financing something, I might think twice before I say something to a person like your CEO, Shar, and say, I think we should do this differently. I will not. So it's also a call on HR, which I will see later on, is people, please throw out every procedure, formal or informal, throw it out if it's not bringing safety. No, if it's doing harm in all your communication structures or whatever, just throw them out. Nothing will happen. So that's...
Yeah, it's fascinating, because I don't think this president or individual had any self-awareness.
No.
And it was the people leaders like myself that had to be the honest broker. And you can imagine walking into his office and looking at the dead animals pictures and stuff. And I'm not saying I'm against hunting, I'm just saying it was scary.
Yeah, that is what happens. It's setting the scene. It's setting the scene how you want people to view you. And this is the first reflection you can do. How do I want my employees to view me? And this is something that CEOs and everybody in organizations with responsibility and power, because this is something you need to be aware of. The higher you get, the more influence you have, but the less you hear about how people are feeling when that happens. So in 2020, and I would highly recommend Clark to read it, because first of all, it's a great book, but it's very practical, and it says, actually, simply, it is where you feel included, where it's safe to learn, where it's safe to contribute, and safe to challenge the status quo without having to be afraid to be embarrassed in public, like you said, or where I have so many examples also that how do you want people to be creative if they're getting embarrassed? So this is the thing to do. And what you can do right away, everybody out there, is start to reflect. Do I include? Do I create an environment that's safe? What do I do? Do I feel safe? Do I feel safe to contribute, to say, okay, I think, you know, we should take this direction, or, and especially in this time, there is no old way. We can go back to the old way. No, there's no old way.
Right.
It's just not going to be out there. So everything is new, and what you do, what you need is a safe ground where you can start building your resilience and so on. It has to be safe to do so. No.
Well, last week we spent a lot of time prior to our forum, which you might enjoy listening to, talking about Ellen and her talk show. And that's all over the media right now, where she was unaware of the fact that there was not psychological safety in her organization. And I started feeling a bit sorry for her after we talked about it last week, but then I've actually been hearing more and more and more that she really did not have an environment of psychological safety. And what's interesting to me is I believe that right now our society as a whole and companies as a whole are really starting to realize that this needs to be addressed. This needs to be talked about. We can't shy away from this. These are not easy conversations, but we have to be vulnerable and authentic and really take a good awareness look at ourselves as a leadership team. And do we have a hidden underlying culture that is permeating our culture that we're blind to, that we don't even know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think asking those questions, reading these books, listening to what you're talking about is key for organizational success.
It is. I remember I have an example of what we did again about 2 years ago, and it only the follow-up happened yesterday. That's why I want to share it. I was called by a senior manager that I know for a very long time, and he called me and he said, "Lettie, I have this team." Okay. And he said, you know, this team it has actually a key role in the organization, but, you know, everybody is satisfied with what they do. They work, the members of the team, you know, they're happy, and, you know, they don't understand why I challenge them, why I give them more responsibility, why I want them to do more, and so on. And he said, I think that those two, I need to, you know, throw off these two. I need to, you know, send them off. Lay them off is the word, I think. And I said, well, if that's your idea, why do you call me? He says, well, you know, they're very good at what they do. And maybe you have another idea. And I said, well, you know, I do have another idea. And I would love to try it. And what I did is, that was 2 years ago, I went into this team, heard what they talked about. And what happened in this team was that they were doing a good job, they were satisfied, but then all of a sudden the manager started, you know, speaking out his expectations, and they weren't meeting up to those expectations. So they started to feel, okay, the pressure is rising. We have to do something different, but we don't have a clue what it is. And we don't know how to do this. So we did a TMA analysis with the team, and which is a talent analysis. And we had the dialogues with them, and which was already for this team, because you have to learn to talk about this. Not everybody can do this right away, so it's not an easy skill. It's something where you somehow have fear of as well to do this. So the TMA is a perfectly instrument to use to learn how to talk about this. And then we did a team profile. And at the team profile, they invited the senior manager. They did it themselves because they wanted to join. And it was fantastic, because all of a sudden everybody realized what was happening. You know? And so we set a sort of together, we set a set of competencies, so wished for behavior. And they agreed on it, and they started working at it. And within a year, they became a real high-performance team with fun. And so I've been following them through this 2 years. And yesterday I was there, And there was a bit of worry in the team. And I said, what's going on? And they said, well, you know, we're getting a new leader. And he's doing work in our team as well. So he's also on operational basis, but he's also our leader. And we're a bit worried. We don't want to stop doing what we're doing. And I was so happy that the situation was so safe that they said, you know, can we repeat the TMA? And can we ask this leader to join us and do a new team composition? And, you know, learn to know each other, and so we can work together. So that's how it works out in collaboration. And that was fantastic. I just wanted to share it because it's...
that is fantastic. And Comp Team is so excited because we are also getting certified in the TMA and want to utilize it. Lisa, did you want to mention, are you seeing a trend in the chat or any things that you're noticing?
Yeah, there's been just a little bit in the chat. I think that one of the things I wanted to call back is that for those of you who are on that weren't on it before we actually officially started at 10, we were talking about feedback and the culture of feedback being sort of really central to creating psychological safety, and how even different native cultures and country cultures have differences around that. Like in America, for many, many years, it has been, our children have really been raised, children are to be seen and not heard, you know, and there is this very strong culture of feedback means you did something wrong, or you got to go into timeout, or, you know, but rather than having it be something that is a learning process that is natural and understood. So I think that a lot of what we're seeing that you guys have been talking about in the workplaces is that just even the concept of having meaningful, open, honest discussions is just not, it's not something that has been practiced on a widespread basis in family systems in the United States for many decades. And so now we're reaping some of the stories that you're telling are really that shutting off of the feedback. And until that changes, I think it is hard to create true psychological safety.
Yeah, what you describe, Lisa, sorry, Sam, what you describe is actually going from control to participation and empowerment. And this is something that is, Germany is a very hierarchical country as well, you know, where a lot of things top down are organized. The Dutch are a bit different there. So I had some cultural crashes when I moved over. But the thing is that there is this basic thing that if I oppress it, it is not gone. So, and this is something I often say to people: think about the worst thing that could happen. What is the worst thing that could happen if you talk about it? I'm not very good at it myself, every now and then, but you know, that is what I say is talk about this.
Usually the fear is way more than the conversation itself, right?
Yeah.
Build it up in our mind. Yeah.
How often I haven't heard, why haven't I done this before? I don't know. It's something, but it helps enormously. And that is something we shouldn't forget, is that leaders are a role model. So if you go out and you do your leadership rounds, however you call them, I remember in the early days, you know, I planned them. Because as a board member or a senior manager, you have so many things you have to go through, but you almost forget that the people, you know, that's where it's all about. So I scheduled it in my calendar, and I just went on wards. I went on, you know, in the industrial part, and I just walked over there and I talked to people and asked them questions, how the kids were doing, and how. And I had an agreement with my leaders that what I wanted them to do is always inform me when somebody had a birthday, when somebody died, when somebody's taking care of a family member or something. Just, you know, to let people know they're important, you know. And
Lettie, one of the things that was asked in the chat that I did want to make sure before we close today that you had a chance, the leader you were just talking about, what was he doing to up his emotional intelligence game? So what were some of the actual things specifically that he was doing around that?
Sorry, can you, because I don't get what you're asking me.
The question in the chat is the leader that you were talking about that you sort of came to initially and said, let's let him go, you know, and then you turned that situation around. What were some of the things that that leader was doing, that the practices or the behaviors that were helping to create that stronger emotional intelligence?
With the team, you mean, what he was doing to support the team? Well, the most important thing is, I think, is that he listened, and he stopped the blame. So he started looking for solutions and what he could do, and he let them talk about how they wanted to do the job. So it's not that he was telling them how to do it. And he's an absolute people manager. And one of the things he is and that helps enormously. We all know that. He likes people and he wants people to feel happy in what they do. So the reason why he called me, because he was coming to a point where he didn't know how to do anything else. And he already did his conversation and he did his thing. So together, and that's why it's sometimes always so important also to have an external view. Because if you're in the system and in your organization, you're part of the system. You don't always see what happens. And we have, and that's something I would like to say, is why psychological safety is so difficult. Because it is not what we always tend to do. You know, the first thing we already talked about is that, you know, I always think that you think the same as I do. You know, this is our shared beliefs. And this is changing already through multicultural diversity and so on. But it's also changing now because the world is changing. So everything that was what we were used to isn't there anymore. So the second thing is, which happens throughout the world, is that we live in a sort of a blame environment. You know, if something goes wrong, we like to blame people, especially other people, not ourselves, but other people. So it wasn't me. I wasn't on duty. I don't know. Maybe somebody else did it. So bear this in mind, that this is what people do. And why is psychological safety so difficult? Because it has to do with the environment. And I've heard that some people like sports. I love soccer. You know, we call it soccer in Europe. And I don't know if everybody knows Lionel Messi, but he is, you know, world's best soccer player there is. He's been soccer player of the year so many times. And
right.
Lionel Messi was very young when his talents were seen, you know, by Barcelona. He plays by FC Barcelona. So he picked up on that. He got an environment where he could flourish, and, you know, everything was around him and scoring goals, and he grew out to a phenomenon. Now, Lionel Messi is original from Argentina. If you take Lionel Messi with all his talents and all his skills and all his competencies, and you take him from Barcelona to Argentina, he scores half of the goals. So just to bear in mind how important the environment is. We all know, we can all think about, okay, which environment did I feel well? Where did I flourish? What fits me? What am I good at? So that is why this is so important.
So Lettie, I'm just going to interject here. We only have about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
And so just to wrap up here, it's you're going to love some of the chat going on. We've got some sports people.
To be honest, I turned it off because I know I'm so curious, looking at it all the time and get lost in my own conversation. I just go to. I think we almost covered almost everything. You know, it's you know, there are sort of 4 general behaviors that you know, set the stage. We talked about it. That is important. Invite, and in your response, thrive towards learning. Yeah? You can do this in all situations. You can do this in high board meetings, but you can also do this in a very small online meeting. You know, ask people, what is this goal of the meeting? You know, these are the rules and the responsibilities we have in the meeting, and invite all people to share. Okay.
That's great. Well, so I understand we can refer people to do a one-on-one with you if they have any additional questions. Yeah. And since we have 1 minute left, I just want to say we are offering a free TMA assessment, so you can really get the flavor of what we're talking about. And I think once you personally have a TMA assessment and access to the portal and have discussions with any one of us on the team here, I think all this will make a lot of sense about psychological safety. So I just want to lastly say, All of this information is found on the comp team website. All the recording of this, we ask you to like, we ask you to share all of this information and take advantage of our information. And Lettie, we're going to invite you back again. I think you have a lot more to talk about, right?
Oh, I can do this for hours. I just, you know, I think it's so important, and I want everybody to feel safe, you know, and that's what I wish for everybody. So.
Well,
yes,
thank you very much. And we're going to wrap up now because it's 11:30 now. So just want to say thank you to Meredith. Thank you, Lettie. We just really appreciate you. The topics are so perfectly aligned. Yeah. And I think that downsizing would be far smoother if there was psychological safety. So just want to say thank you all. We appreciate you and love to have further discussion moving forward. So
Yes.
thank you all.
See you
Okay.
next
Thanks so much for having us.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
week. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.